This is the Rich Dad Radio Show. The good news and bad news about money. Here's Robert Kiyosaki.
Hello. Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show, the good news and bad news about money. And today we have a very, extremely important show. I mean, all of our programs are important. But as you may now well know, we're in this crisis, this pandemic, and they're opening tattoo parlors, which I'm happy about, which are essential industries. I'm sure they employ a lot of people. But anyway,
I'm waiting for the hair salons and the nail salons and the spas.
This is a cartoon show as far as I'm concerned. But anyway, Kim and I and the company, we're doing great. And the reason Rich Dad's doing great is not that we could predict the future, but we're prepared for the future. And our show today is the guy with the plan, the man with the plan, Brent Johnson. And I think he has the clearest vision of the future. So I want you to pay attention. I don't care where you live in the world, because I think Brent has as clear a vision of the future as possible. And his shtick is much like my shtick. It's gold versus the U.S. dollar. That is the thing. And some of you heard I was in Vietnam in 72 when Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard in 71. And I've been a gold bug. I could see the demise of the dollar, but the dollar never crashed. And so Brent now, like I said, he's going to tell you what he sees coming so you can prepare for it. You know, for some of you, the best investment you can, let's say you live in Chile right now or Argentina, your best investment could be a U.S. dollar, better than gold. Yeah. So if you can understand that, that's why this show is so important, because it's really about the future. So Brent has a thing called the dollar milkshake theory. And I feel for you, Brent, because every show you're on, you have to explain that damn theory of yours. You're now labeled as the milkshake guy.
Yeah, I do like milkshakes, so that's good. It could be something worse.
But I'm going to not shine it on, but I'm going to recommend everybody go to YouTube and watch several of Brent's presentations on this dollar milkshake, because it's better in pictures than in words. So that's why we're going to be talking about what you should do into the future. Now it's post 2020.
Yes, and I know nobody's got the crystal ball, but we're all looking at, what if this, what if that? And Brent, my job will be just to keep the vocabulary and all very simple for our listeners, because I've listened to several of your YouTube, and I've had to rewatch them several times to understand it. And I'm excited to hear your comments on what you see coming in the future, because that's what we're all asking right now.
Yeah, and Brent, Kim's very modest. She was with me when we took those silly companies public.
Okay.
So we understand the Vancouver and the Toronto stock exchanges, and
the wild, wild world.
That den of thieves.
Yeah.
So anyway, Brent, welcome to the program,
Brent.
and please give us a little background.
Sure. So I grew up in a little town in western Nebraska. Most of my friends were either farmers or ranchers, or there was a local power plant. So it was, very kind of typical all-American small town childhood. Grew up, went to school in Kansas. I went to grad school in Arizona, moved to New York because I'd always wanted to work on Wall Street. Was there for about 3 or 4 years. And then I moved to San Francisco with the firm I was working for at the time in 2000. And it was kind of the height of the dot-com boom. And about a month after I got out there, the market crashed. And so, I kind of started to build up my business after that crash. And then we had the real estate crash in 2008. And then, now we've got this other crash. So it seems like every 5 or 6 years I get a nice crash. So
difference is you know how to take advantage of it.
I'm used to it at this point. I don't know what I'd do if it was nice and calm. For lack of a better word, I kind of had a come to Jesus in 2007 when I was working for a big Wall Street firm, and I just didn't really like the way things were going. I had kind of a fortuitous meeting with a potential client, which kind of, they asked some very good questions that I couldn't answer, and I thought I should be able to answer these questions, and that kind of started me on this period of self-discovery that I wasn't getting through the traditional, firm that I was working for. And I really kind of dug into the history of the monetary system and how the monetary system was designed, and, how it changes, and, fiat currencies and gold. And how money gets loaned into existence, where it comes from, all that kind of stuff. And so, I'd say over the last 10 to 15 years, I've spent a lot of time, energy, and effort in understanding how the whole system works. Now, whether I can predict what happens from that, I don't know, but I do know how the system works.
Yeah, but what's happened in my world of the investors, your name is God right now. So anyway, again, please go see Brent, Brent Johnson, YouTube, Dollar Milkshake Theory. Watch the video, because otherwise words will not do it justice. So without much ado, can you really briefly explain Dollar Milkshake Theory?
So I'll
try and confuse anybody out there.
Yeah, no, I'll make it very simple. So it was really based off of a movie that came out maybe 10 years ago about this ruthless oil executive, and he would just do anything to beat his competitors. And at one point, he was explaining to one of his competitors that, I don't need to buy your land. I'm just going to stick a straw down into the ground, and I'm going to suck up all your oil anyway.
You're talking about the owner of the Dallas Cowboys, I think.
Yeah. He said, I'm going to drink your milkshake. And essentially what I think has happened over the last 10 years, and what I think is going to happen over the next few years, is that the world, after the financial crisis, the central banks just got together and just printed all this liquidity. And that went on for 5 or 6 years. And in 2000, at the end of 2015, beginning of 2016, the U.S. stopped mixing the milkshake, and we started raising interest rates. And the raising of the interest rates from 2016 to 2019, combined with a number of other factors, it's not just interest rates, but interest rates were a big factor. And the fact that our interest rates, while they've come down a lot, are still higher than Japan and Europe, who have negative rates. That, along with these other factors of having the global reserve currency system, having the dollar payment system, having the largest U.S. military, having the deepest capital markets, all of that stuff acts as a straw which sucks up all the liquidity that the world is printing. Now,
So Brent, we call it at Rich Dad cash flow. The cash is flowing into, right? But the trouble, and this is the big part about it, is much of the world's debt is denominated in dollars.
Exactly.
So that means if I'm living in Argentina, I've got to convert to dollars to pay the bill.
That's right.
So that's why all of this money is flowing from all over the world right now, and that's the milkshake theory.
And it's flowing back to the U.S.?
Into the U.S., yeah.
Okay.
But it's
either flowing into the U.S. or it's just flowing into dollars that are held outside the U.S. So there's dollars in the United States and there's dollars outside the United States. The dollars outside the United States are called euro dollars. It's different than euros, so you don't confuse euros and euro dollars. But at the end of the day, whether you like the dollar or whether you hate the dollar, whether you think it's a good currency or a horrible currency, the fact of the matter is it is the currency which the world runs on.
Right.
And so even if you hate the dollar, if you live in Argentina or Turkey or China or Brazil or France, you still need dollars to operate on the world stage. Right. Now, I think there's a lot of people who would like to change that, but as of right now, they haven't. And I don't. And I think the efforts that they have made to do so are too little, too late. And that's kind of what's setting up this whole dollar milkshake theory.
So, and then you were also, like me, a gold bug, and you had a gold fund and all this. And your question was, if they're printing so many dollars, why doesn't gold take, why don't people just rush to gold?
Right.
And I think that's the question you were asking, is the question I'm asking myself. Most gold bug guys are asking themselves also, is if there's so many fiat or I call fake dollars, why doesn't gold go through the roof? Right.
Yeah.
So why isn't it?
Again, I think it depends on where you're at and what currency you're denominated in. Like gold in Argentino pesos looks really good right now. Right. Gold in Turkish lira looks really good. Gold in just about every currency other than the dollar is at its all-time high, and it's getting pretty close to itself in the dollar as being the all-time high as well. Still a couple $100 away, but in many ways, people think of the gold and the dollar as enemies or the antithesis of each other. I do think that we'll get into a period where they rise together, but I think ultimately gold will win the battle. The reason is because I think gold is the market's money. If we just had free markets and there was no government influence and central banks and, legal tender laws, then I think the market would choose gold as money. But we don't live in a free market. We may want to, but we don't. And because of the governments of the world, and not just U.S., don't want a gold standard because they like to be able to spend more than they earn. Right. Politicians get elected by making promises. And so I don't think the governments of the world want to go back to a gold standard. I think the market might force it on them, but they will fight it. And in that fight, I think that's where gold gets kind of tampered down from time to time.
Yeah, I was listening to Harry Dent, and he's an anti-gold guy at times. He was calling gold to retrace to 400. Yeah. And I got sexually stimulated thinking about that thing, because all that is a buying sign to me. You know what I mean? Because I'm an accumulator. I'm not a seller. Can
I ask a question too, Brent?
Sure.
When you said that the markets are going to force the gold standard on governments, why and how is that going to happen?
Well, I don't know if they'll force a gold standard on governments, but I think they may force gold. Gold may go higher anyway. And I think what will happen is I think the system is going to have to get reset in some form. And I think in order for the market or for all the people to accept whatever new system they put forward, I think gold will have to be, I think it will likely be part of it, at least in some form. I don't think we're necessarily going to go back to a full gold standard. Maybe we do some kind of a commodity-backed money of a basket of commodities, or maybe it's a new global currency that's combined of a number of different global currencies. But I think gold would have to be part of it in order to say that there's something real behind it.
So what Brent is talking about every so often of these accords, like it was a Plaza Accord and the Louvre Accord, and the world gets together, or the Bretton Woods Conference, and they all get together and they say, well, what is money?
Right.
And so that was in 44, the dollar became money, backed by gold, and then 71, Nixon took it off the gold standard.
Right. And
that's when I think guys like Brent and myself started going, oh my God, that means they're going to print as much as they want. But it didn't mean the demise of the dollar. Now it's going to probably be the demise, if you're living in Australia, of the Aussie dollar. Because the Aussie is really tight. The Aussie banks are really tied to U.S. banks.
Yeah.
They've got to pay a lot of that debt back in U.S. dollars, not Aussie dollars. So the reason I wanted to have Brett on this program, we come back, I want him to open up his crystal ball now, post-2020, post-coronavirus crisis. What has changed since I was watching you prior to this?
Yep.
But now that this crisis has hit, and the good news is tattoo parlors are opening up.
Well, so I think.
Wait, Brett, hold that. So I want you to think about that. I want you to think about, when those tattoo parlors open up, man, all hell's going to break loose, right? I mean, the economy's going to boom. No, but your forecast for the U.S. is really optimistic. I mean, the stock market is going to.
Well,
finally, somebody's optimistic.
You know what I mean?
Well, it's optimistic but it ends horribly.
I know so Brett, save that for the second 15 minutes. Okay, because this is why, like I said, when I first came across your work, you were sitting at some gold conference, and I'm going, God, this guy makes sense. But now that the coronavirus has hit, I want you to say now why there's going to be this boom, but what's going to be the demise. That's really kind of, and this whole purpose of this show is to prepare, not predict.
Okay.
If you get ready for it.
I think.
Wait, hang on. We'll be right back.
Take a quick break.
We're going to take a break. We'll be right back with Brent Johnson. He is the man he's got the clearest vision of the future. Again, it's not about predicting, it's about preparing. So Kim and I are very happy because we're prepared, but I want to know what to prepare for next. So we're right back. Welcome back, Robert Kiyosaki and Kim Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show. We're broadcasting from gorgeous Scottsdale, Arizona, which is social distance. There's nobody here anymore, but the weather's perfect. And anyway, you can listen to the Rich Dad Radio program anytime, anywhere on iTunes, Android, or YouTube. And please leave a comment when you review or whenever you listen. And all of our programs are archived at richdadradio.com. We archive them for one reason, is we're an education show. We don't sell anything. We don't sell investments or recommend and people buy this or do that or what should do with your $10,000. But listen to this program again and you'll hear twice as much because repetition is how we learn. So once again, go to the richdadradio.com, listen to this podcast. Again, it's a very, very important podcast. Have your friends, family, and business associate listen to it and discuss it. Because our very, very special guest is a person I have tremendous respect for, Brent Johnson, CEO of Santiago Capital. but I think he has the clearest view on the future. And I'll just toot my own horn. Kim and I and the Rich Dad Company are doing very, very well, because not that we could predict the future, but we're prepared for it. So our cash flow is flowing back in. We have lots of gold, cash, silver, and we're fine, but we prepared for it. So our guest today is Brent Johnson.
Have toilet paper.
Yeah, we have toilet paper. That's pretty sad. I went to a politically incorrect party last night. Kenny shows up with toilet paper.
It might be the next currency.
It might be.
But anyway, our guest today, Brent Johnson, he is the inventor of the dollar milkshake theory, and it is taking my little world of investors by storm, because I believe he can see what's coming next. And again, we're not about predicting the future, but preparing for it. So please go to YouTube. His name is Brent Johnson, B-R-E-N-T. Watch the dollar milkshake theory and understand what he's saying, because it's better in pictures than in words. But what I'm going to talk to Brent right now is, since 2020, which has accelerated this whole possible demise of the dollar, or the boom of the dollar, but also the boom of the U.S. economy, in spite of a crashing world economy. It's very important. I want to hear what he has to say right now. Any comments, Kim?
No, I just want to hear what Brent has to say, because as we said, we're here about preparing, not predicting. Unfortunately, a lot of people have found out the hard way through shock that they were not prepared when the coronavirus hit, and who could have predicted that? But so now we have an opportunity to hear from an expert on what you see, Brent, coming down the pipe.
And then one last thing, if you're living in Australia, your best investment might be the U.S. dollar, not gold. Right. And that's the irony of it, because Brent, being a gold bug like Kim and myself, the big battle is between gold and the dollar, but it might not be a battle. But eventually, as Brent is saying, the gold should ultimately win out. In the meantime, the dollar is going to boom. The U.S. economy may boom. I saw your predictions. I mean, you're calling for Dow 35, gold at 3,000, and all this stuff.
Yeah.
So what do you see happening?
I'd say that the main difference pre-corona and post-corona, from my point of view, is the extent to which the United States is going to help mix the milkshake going forward. Before, I thought that we might mix it a little bit and the rest of the world would continue to mix it a lot and we would suck it in. Well, now I think we're in there mixing it with them. But I still think, for a number of reasons, the U.S. is going to be the primary recipient of sucking in all that milkshake, all that liquidity that the rest of the world is, and that we are now printing, or the liquidity that we're putting into the market.
So the world's printing money, but that's going to flow to the U.S. is what you're saying.
Exactly. And as that capital comes into the U.S., I don't just think it sits in cash. I think it gets put into places that yield a little bit more than cash. Maybe it goes into Coca-Cola. Maybe it goes into IBM. Maybe it goes into Electronic Arts or Microsoft. Some of these companies that have some growth potential that maybe pay a dividend. And to think about it, it really depends on where you're sitting on how this works out. If you're sitting in Argentina and you have some excess savings and you can put it in the dollar and the Argentinian peso goes down 10%, you've just made 10%. But if you also put it in Coca-Cola and Coca-Cola pays you a 3 or 4% dividend, now you've made 13%. And if Coca-Cola happens to go up 6%, now you've made 20%. So, now you don't get that same thing if you're in the United States, because the dollar is your currency. But my point is that whether you like it or not, the biggest demand for currency out there is the demand for the dollar. And despite the fact that they're printing a lot of it, the demand for it dwarfs the supply.
And the reason for that is much of the world's debt is also denominated in dollars. So they have to pay back the debt in dollars.
Absolutely. Everybody knows that the U.S. is 24, 23, 25 trillion dollars in the debt. But what a lot of people don't know is that the rest of the world has an equivalent amount of debt. A lot of times the number that's spoken is 13 trillion that the rest of the world owes. But if you actually drill down into corporates and some other, the shadow banking system, it's probably 25 or 30 trillion dollars outside the United States that people that don't operate in the dollar owe in dollars. And again, when the demand for the dollar comes for paying the interest on those dollar loans and paying those dollar loans back. So the demand for dollars is kind of through the roof. I saw a good chart the other day that showed the size of the balance sheet for the Fed versus our GDP. And then it showed the size of the balance sheet for the ECB versus the Euro area GDP, Japan versus Japan GDP. And we are still the lowest, but even that is misleading because we are the world's currency, and a big part of the global GDP takes place in dollars. So if you actually calculate the Fed's balance sheet as a percent of global GDP, it's much lower than everybody else. So if everybody else is printing and we're printing, but there's demand for our currency and there's no demand for other currencies, that's a formula for the dollar to rise despite the continued stimulus that the government's providing.
Plus the U.S. stock market. Like this one woman, she was talking about Procter & Gamble may be the best bond there is, you know.
Yeah, no, and that's a very good point. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So there's always good and bad news about everything. And so for those, like I was watching a presentation on Canada, boy, you trashed them. Holy moly.
Unfortunately, yeah. Yeah. I like Canada, but they're in a lot of trouble.
Tell me about it.
Yeah.
Like we went public twice in Canada, 3 times in Canada, and we love that place.
Yeah,
there are a bunch of cowboys up there too. But
yeah. Well, you know, I was up there in January, and when I was giving my presentation, I went out to dinner with a number of executives, and I kept talking about Canada, and they kept saying, "You need to start talking about Western Canada and Eastern Canada."
Yeah. So a quick question. So your thing is the dollar's going to get stronger. Is going to lift the U.S. economy and all our tangible assets here. But what is the demise? When's it break?
I think ultimately, I mean, the dollar, the monetary system is just not designed for the dollar to get stronger. And as it does so, it's going to just wreck the global economy. I mean, I think the rest of the world is going to just go through really, 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 difficult time.
Right.
And ultimately, that's not good for the U.S. either. So as the dollar continues to get stronger, despite the Fed's efforts to, bring it lower, I think eventually the world will have to come together in another Bretton Woods type conference or another Plaza Accord type conference. And I think they'll have to either write debts down or introduce a new currency or reset the system in some form or another. And I think when that happens, that will be the point at which the dollar will start to lose value. That would be the point at which people no longer are rushing into the dollar and rushing into the United States. Maybe that's the time to go buy things in Canada or buy things in Australia or buy things in Argentina or buy things in Turkey, right? Because their assets will be very discounted. And I think as capital then leaves the U.S. to go invest in those other places, that will cause the dollar to go down.
So and the capital is running out of the dollar. Is what you're
exactly.
saying.
You were talking about cash flow. Nothing is more important than cash flow. Right. If cash is flowing in, you're in good shape, and if cash is flowing out, that's a bad thing. Yeah. And so, as capital rushes into the U.S., I think that'll be good for the U.S. Eventually, when it runs out of the U.S., I think that will be bad for the U.S. Right. I just don't think we're there yet.
And so with the coronavirus, because we don't know what is coming with that. How do you see in your world? What impact does that have in the future?
Well, it has 2 impacts that are absolutely opposing each other. So and it's a progression. So what I mean by that is the whole COVID virus has caused global trade, global travel, global movement to stop, and that means the same for the velocity of money. So, there's never enough money in the system to pay all the debt. So money has to circulate at a certain level of speed in order to service all the debts that are out there. When money velocity falls, money doesn't circulate, people miss their payments, or defaults happen, and you get a contraction. That's a credit contraction. And so what the central banks do is they pump liquidity in to try to counteract that lack of velocity. And so what I think this COVID and the lack of the flow of money is making the global economy come in under even more pressure than it was before. It makes it even harder to get those dollars to service that dollar debt. And so I think it's kind of accelerating the downside of the milkshake. But here's the flip side, is they're going to print all these dollars and all this currency, right? And so when the COVID does leave, and money is start to flow again, now you've got a lot more money out there, and now it's flowing. So that's a recipe for inflation. But first you get the deflation, you print all the money, and then when the money starts to move, you get high levels of inflation because there's so much liquidity now. So again, I don't think we're there yet, but that's what's setting up. So I think we have deflation, for the next year, 18 months, and then we have inflation after that as capital starts to circulate again.
You'll have to borrow money to buy toilet paper.
Probably so. Yeah.
Because it goes through the roof.
Yeah.
Anyway, I know you're in San Francisco, but Jim Rickards uses the thing about the shocks, the little tremors.
Yeah.
So what would the tremors be in the future, saying that the dollar has reached its apex?
Yeah. Well, I think there's several things. If the world got together, ex-US, and just said, you know what, we're sick of the dollar, we don't want to do anything else with it, we're all going to go to this instead of the dollar, that would be a monster tremor, right? That would be the San Andreas Fault just rupturing. But if more and more bilateral trade agreements happen between countries where they stop using the dollar, if a non-dollar payment system exists that countries can send money around the world and it doesn't go through a U.S. bank, then that would help. But that system doesn't exist right now. The other thing is that the U.S. military enforces the U.S. dollar as the global reserve currency.
Right.
People don't like me saying that, but it's the truth.
It's true.
If you doubt it, look at Panama, look at Grenada, look at Libya, look at Iraq. I mean, that is what we do.
Yeah.
And so until somebody can really, take us on that level, I don't see it either.
So a couple of questions. What's your forecast for the European zone with the euro?
Yeah.
And you have the English and you have the Japanese. What do you see in each country?
So I think the euro is probably going to go away, or it's not going to continue to exist in its current form. I think on a price basis, it goes to at least 80. It's at 108 now. So it probably goes down 25 or 30% from here. I think the yen might be, I think the yen's going to go to at least 150, maybe to 2.
It's going back to where it came from.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, essentially, I think the dollar is going to go back to its all-time high, and I think the rest of the world's currencies, even the big ones, are going to get cut in half.
So if you're living in Japan, that means life will get more expensive.
Absolutely.
Yeah, same as euro.
Absolutely. And so that's what I say about gold. If you're not a U.S. dollar investor, you could probably back up the truck on gold right now. I think gold may still have a tough time in U.S. dollar terms. You just look what happened a month ago in the middle of March when everybody needs dollars. You sell whatever you can to get dollars.
Yep.
But outside of Japan, nobody needs yen. Outside of Europe, nobody needs euros. Outside of Argentina, nobody needs Argentinian pesos. But the whole world needs dollars.
I'll tell you something interesting. I was in Japan not too long ago, and they were searching me for gold.
Is that right?
Yeah, and then
wow.
And then I was coming out of Zimbabwe. That Zimbabwe dollar is good for.
Yeah.
And they were searching me for dollars.
Wow.
It's such an interesting world today. You travel the world, you see it.
I mean, essentially, there's two games going on, right? There's the fiat game, and there's the gold. And there's the true currency game. And the point I like to make is that fiat currencies trade relative to each other. So even if you look at 10 fiat currencies and you realize they're all fiat, they're all horrible, one of them is going to outperform the other 9. And that's what I say with the dollar. Now, gold might outperform the dollar, but the dollar is going to outperform all the other 9. And you can make a lot of money playing the dollar versus all the other fiat. So if you don't want to put I understand owning gold. Everybody should own gold. But if you don't want to put 100% of your money in gold, then put whatever you don't have in gold into the dollar or dollar assets, because the dollar is going to just crush, I think, all the other fiat currencies.
And how does does Bitcoin play into all this?
Bitcoin's an interesting one. I own Bitcoin. I think if you have the ability and you have some space in your portfolio for speculation, you should own some Bitcoin. I don't think it replaces gold. I think it's in addition to gold. It's a very asymmetric play. I think it probably either goes to $1,000, which is be down 80%, or it goes to 100,000 or $1 million, and that so it's either all or nothing kind of a thing.
And then your last forecast, you said gold 3,000, which makes all the gold bugs happy.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it goes straight there. I think it probably, stays under pressure in US dollar terms for a while, but eventually it's going to at least 3,000. And I think it'll probably go to 5,000 at some point.
Okay. Yeah, you make all the gold bugs happy,
No, I know they don't like it when I say it could go to 1,500 in the short term, but
you can't make everybody happy.
No.
Those guys trading both ways.
Yeah.
Hey, Brent, really, thank you
Brent.
very much.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Happy to come back anytime.
Yeah, you're the guy with a vision right now, and
we'll see. We'll see. I wish everybody luck.
No. Thank you, man. You take care.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you, Brent.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
Welcome back, Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show, the good news and bad news about money. Once again, I want to thank Brent Johnson, Brent Johnson. He's the Milkshake Theory of money. And if you didn't understand parts of it, please watch his YouTube videos because he has some illustrations and all this. It's a very important show because he's talking about the future. And if you don't want to get caught with your pants down again, this better go and look at the future now. Because, not to brag, but Kim and I and the Rich Dad Company are doing extremely well because we're prepared for this. And markets go up, markets go down, but we're preparing for everything. So I think Brent has the key to the future right now. So please watch it. Once again, listen to the Rich Dad Radio Show anytime, anywhere on iTunes or Android and YouTube. Leave a review whenever you listen. And all our programs are archived at richdadradio.com. We archive them because repetition is how you learn. Listen to this program again. You'll learn twice as much. But more importantly, get friends, family, and business associates to listen to it and discuss it, and you'll have a better view of how to prepare for the future. Any comments, Kim?
Yeah, I really liked what Brent was saying because I've watched some of the YouTube videos and he's talking to investors and he's talking to people who are very much involved in the stock market. Here, he kept it very, very simple, and I learned a lot in terms of how dollars and currencies play throughout the world, his prediction of we're probably going to go into deflation and then inflation. But it was eye-opening for me and stimulating. And given the whole coronavirus deal that's happening right now, I think it's really, really timely and really important to listen to this show more than once.
Right, man. I just like guys who can see it. And he was a gold bug like Kim and I are gold bugs and silver bugs. But when he didn't see, when the Fed was printing, and they printed trillions of dollars, and most of the debt in the world is denominated in dollars. So there's a dollar shortage. So there's a short on dollars. There's not enough dollars out there. But he couldn't figure out if the Fed was printing all of this money, why did the price of gold goes up? Well, it's because the rest of the world is in debt to the U.S. dollar. So how long will this last is a question. And I couldn't wait, and I've been up early this morning. I couldn't wait to talk to him because I want to know what is the apex. When does the dollar peak? It's like the coronavirus peaks and then goes down, hopefully. But anyway, it peaks. Then what will happen after that? And that's the question.
And I do like what he talked about, that there could be a global reset going, like another Bretton Woods, or we've got to now
a Louvre Accord, or a Plaza Accord.
Yeah, we've got to relook at this whole thing globally, which I think is refreshing. Could be refreshing. I think it's going to be a little scary before we get there, but it will be what it will be.
In one of his YouTube videos, he's such a smart guy. He went to Thunderbird here at Arizona, which is a great graduate school. But he was talking about, if there's 23 chairs and there's, let's say, 10 million in debt. So everybody's running around, but there's only 23 chairs that people can sit at. So it's like musical chairs. And so everybody's happy as long as the music is playing and people are moving. But my question is, when does that music stop and who's going to get a chair? And I think that's the question. And Kim, remember our teacher, Frank? He was the best, right? He was a gold bug, and he took us through all the machinations of that industry. He took us through a public company in China. We saw the world through Frank and gold.
Yeah, we saw behind the scenes, behind the curtain, behind the veil, because it is a veil. There's a curtain, and there's a lot that goes on behind the curtain that nobody ever sees, and nobody ever is told about.
Yeah, Frank's game was the stock market. And the more I learned about the stock market, the reason Kim and I don't invest in the stock market is because guys like Frank are back there, and they're 10 times smarter than we are, and they can smell us coming. So anyway, so we stay out of the stock market, and we don't save. We have lots of dollars because we have cash flow, but we save gold and silver, and that's where we sleep well at night. So that's the big difference, because eventually it's going to blow off. I believe it's going to blow off. Every gold bug believe it's going to blow off, and the dollar is going to be toast. But that's what Brent was saying. It says the structure is broken. It cannot handle it so much longer. Anything else on that?
No, I just, he talks about buying U.S. dollars, and I think anybody can buy U.S. dollars. Right?
Oh, it's so easy today.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. You just open an account, and you're living in Singapore, you can open a U.S. account.
Yep. Or in Singapore, you can buy U.S. dollars through
Yeah.
your own brokerage accounts easily.
So there's so much you can do, but it's a matter of financial education and learning what game is most happy for you. So anyway, I want to thank Brent Johnson. It's a fabulous show. He is the man with the plan, man. He can see right now better than anybody else. So please check him out on YouTube, because his dollar milkshake theory is worth watching, especially today. Thank you all for listening to the Rich Dad Radio Show.